Hey guys, got another screencast for you here. In this one, we're going to take our put task Lambda function and we're going to connect it to the web via the API gateway. To do this, we take our function that's been tested and we know that works, and we're going to add a trigger, which is actually going to cause the function to trigger whenever someone accesses a specific URL on the Amazon platform. So we select what type of trigger we'd like to add, in this case an API gateway trigger. We then create a new API if we don't already have one created. For security, we're going to use open security, which means that anyone can access the endpoint. Now, we could use two other options, one of which is to let Amazon enforce security, or to let someone provide an API key to us. In this case, we're going to go with open. And under additional settings, since we're creating one, we'd like to name this something that will be generic for all of our Lambda functions. In this case, we'll just make it our task API. So we'll scroll down, click the add, which will add the trigger to our function. And now, whenever this trigger is selected, you'll see the API gateway listed here. So if we click the task API, it takes us to our API gateway management console and shows us our new API gateway. In this case, we've got a few changes to make. First off, a generic API gateway is going to have the ability to process any type of HTTP request, whether it's a GET, a PUT, a POST, or so on. What we're going to do, since we only handle PUT, is we're going to remove that method using the delete method option. We're going to add a new method using the create method option, select PUT, save it, and then it asks us, well, what does this put option connect to? In this case, it connects to our put task Lambda function. We save it. It tells us it's about to create additional permissions to allow API Gateway to invoke the function. We say OK. And then we now have our method ready to go. Now, one thing we'd like to do to make sure that this function can be accessed from anywhere is to go to Actions and enable CORS, which is the option for allowing requests to come from most any client. After clicking that selection, we click the Enable button. We tell it yes to replace what's out there. And now we have an options request or an options action, and we have our put also. Now our put is where we're actually going to make it possible to integrate a JSON request from the web together with a Lambda function and then send the response back to the client over the web. So a couple of steps we'll have to do here. First off, we need to map the web request to something that Lambda can understand. So we click on the integration request option for our put method, and here we select a mapping template down at the bottom. The mapping template is where we say how the data is converted in its format from a web request to a JSON request that the Lambda function is expecting. So we select when there are no templates defined, and we add a mapping template. And in this case, it's going to be an application JSON data type. And then we click on it. And down here at the bottom, we have our area where we can type in a mapping template. I'm going to jump over to our notepad and grab a copy of this, paste it in here, and allow me to explain. What we have is a JSON snippet with keys and values that represents the JSON that will be sent to the Lambda function. However, the values come out of this input object, and the input object is just the web request that comes in. And the input object has an attribute called JSON, which is the JSON body of the HTTP request. From the body, we're going to request the list ID, the completed attribute, the task date attribute, and the task name attribute. So in essence, we are dynamically building a JSON request. If we didn't do this, what would happen is we would get a full event model that includes the JSON, but it also includes all the extra information regarding a web request. So we click Save, and then we go back from method execution to the definition of this endpoint. And now we have a request coming in. It's being converted, sent to the Lambda function for processing, and then the response comes back to the client. So let's test it and see if it works. So when you click Test, you have the ability to add parameters to the URL. You have the ability to add headers to the HTTP message, and you have the ability to specify a request body. So I'm going to jump back over to Notepad, grab a sample task again, paste that into the body, and in this case, we're going to change it from our previous values. So false, we're going to update same 1234 event. We're going to leave this as API Gateway Test, and this time we'll set these to the third day of the third month. When we click Test, on the right side of the screen, it's going to show us the results. Here, we got back a status code of 200. It took 1445 milliseconds to process. The response was empty. It shows us the headers of the response, and then it shows us all the logging that occurred inside the Lambda function. And in this case, you can see where the endpoint received the message with our input, and it returned back a 200. Now, if we go to the DynamoDB, we see that the old record said 1234 true, February 2nd, an update task. If we refresh, it's now 1234 false, March 3rd, an API gateway test, proving that it worked. So that concludes integrating together a Lambda function with an API event.